Well, howdy, y'all. Jessica DePazzi here, and I talk like that now because I live in Austin. Although I don't think it sounds that aligned for me yet anyway. I feel like such a faker. So today's show is a really great one. I have a great, remarkable guest, like truly, not over speaking here. His name is Remington Donovan, and he's a master numerologist. He's been practicing for 30 years. I can believe it, 30 years in this realm is such a long time. He was born in an ashram, which is really great because he was born into this world. And he doesn't have these kind of spiritual person cliches that, no shade, because I do like the cliches too. He bypasses a lot of that because this is really his life. So he's also a comedian of sorts as well. So that makes this whole exploration around numerology, astrology, tarot, and divination just that much more accessible, curious, and contemplative in a very fun way, which, as you'll learn from this episode, is pretty integral to understanding numerology in another kind of level beyond the basics. So one of the things I loved about this show is we talk about divination. And if you're anything like me, you love a psychic. You love somebody that's going to give you a little peek into what might be in your near future. And if you're also like me, you might wonder, how the hell does it even work? So that was a burning question that I've always had. And I didn't expect Remington to be the person to answer that. I don't know why it didn't come across my mind until we were in conversation. But he went into depth around what is free will, what is fate consciousness, what is destiny consciousness, what is the way of life already lined up for us, is the thing that the diviner, is that what you call it? The psychic or whoever is practicing for you is what they're saying going to happen. If you want it to happen, what do you have to do to change things? What do you have to do if you don't want that thing to happen? So, I mean, like pretty practical information if you're going to ever see a psychic. And this was stuff that I didn't know. So you're going to love the show. And well, okay, I can't say that. I think you'll like this show. And if you do, a rating and review would be so great. It's very nice for me and for my guests because as whole as we are, without external validation, it still feels good. Just being honest. All right, enjoy the show with Remington Donovan. But if he was Hell's Angels in his past lifetime, is there anything numerologically that would tell him he would be different in this lifetime? Like, does it work like that in your system?
Well, I mean, you could probably extrapolate something from that. I mean, if you really abstract the notion, say, of something like Hell's Angels, which we're saying because my 1-year-old, or I guess he's 15 months, but, you know, he's one, it really loves motorcycles. And so I'm always fascinated, like, what's, you know, where's it coming from another life? So that's the joke, is like, maybe it was a Hell's Angels. But if you really think about that, that is about community. It's actually very Aquarian in astrology. Like it's like your tribe, it's your collective, right? And I would think he has a part of his numerology. There's something called your experience number for everybody, and that is based on the year you're born. And that so you add all of those numbers up, and that tells you something, that the idea is that's a number you've been working with. You have experience. So he was born in 2022, so his experience is a 6. And my interpretation overall is that he, at some point in a lifetime, was some part of some sort of like intergalactic, like monastic order. 6 is about being very dedicated to your spiritual tradition, spiritual path. So I kind of joke and call it like the monk number, but meaning like being a part of a spiritual society where people are very dedicated. So in a way, I would think like the Hells Angels on some level are that, because they're dedicated to their community, to their group, and whatever, you know, for them, maybe that's some sort of spiritual community and something that they're of service to in a way.
That's so interesting because one wouldn't usually categorize Hell's Angels as monk-like energy. But that's one of the things I love about astrology and numerology is we get to see things from a completely like lots of different perspectives where, you know, I was just talking to a couple of gentlemen the other night, and one was a Libra. I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. I love Libras. And he's like, well, you can find so much on the internet about Libra or whatnot. He wasn't really into astrology, clearly, but he's like, I can resonate with Scorpio or Cancer. And so from that sense, I don't really buy into it. But if we dive really deep into the things that you do, we can find that there are some serious specifics and really like evolutionary ways of thinking about life that go far beyond what most people might think numerology or astrology is, which would be like some kind of divination thing, or like you are a certain way and that's it.
Oh, 100%. And the thing is, too, even in my book, I really try to get through and get the point across that, even though I have some sort of broad stroke definitions of what, the six is, for example, you need to be able to take that and allow it to be kind of like a springboard or an activation that allows your consciousness to go a lot further out with it. So then you can start saying, well, what numerology would something like, like the Hells Angels be or something like that? Okay, well, they're a community. Even in astrology, that's going to be probably Aquarius. But in numbers, the six makes sense. The six can be like a number of congregation. Six is a real estate agent, right? It's like this union of macrocosm and microcosm. So if you think about something like a spiritual society, let's say a monastic order for a church, a bunch of monks or nuns, they're a microcosm of practitioners in the greater macrocosm of the institution of a church, right? It's the same idea of if you owned a medical recruiting firm, right? You're an agent. You have access to a greater collective of resources that an individual is going to hire you to participate in your service would have access to. So yeah, you really got to use these numbers or astrology or any other divination as a tool to expand your consciousness. And in that, a lot more starts to be revealed.
Mm. So if we just go back to the basics really quick, how would you explain numerology for somebody that's numerologically curious, probably believes it, but doesn't really understand like the Kabbalistic side of things where you come from?
Well, gosh, so many angles. The teaching in magic is that every number is infinite. There is no difference. So we could sit here forever and just be like blah 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 about numbers. But numerology is a spiritual, as the way I deal with it and the way I teach it, the way it was taught to me, it is a spiritual practice, right? So it's not it is a type of yoga. The practice of numerology in of itself is a meditation. And it is meant to activate something in your psyche, in your consciousness. And from that, it sort of like loosens you up, right? And then as you practice it, there's a flow of information that will start coming through. Numerology is very aligned to synchronicity. There's two rules. The first rule is there are no rules. The second rule is there are no coincidences, but also there are no rules. So it can't be a rule, but there is this synchronicity. So what I have found too is that by practicing numerology, things start to work out. Things start to align, right? So the numerology, I use it in a lot of different facets, but in my numerology book, I teach people how to do a chart the way I do it. Right. Yes, there it is. I actually made sure I got a copy off the shelf. Didn't know how much we were going to film here. But so there is a method in which you can create a chart. Those listening, if you're familiar with astrology, it's like your astrology chart. So based on your birthday, there is a series of numbers and each placement means something, right? So we're talking about the experience number, which is what you've already, a number, really not the number, but it's the idea and the spiritual teachings and all of the energies of what that number is that you've spent many lifetimes working with that. Now, a numerology chart is a great way to show where an individual has tendencies, has ability, has natural ability, and then little things that each individual was here and incarnated to work on, right? So that's like your karma number, for example. Um, but I have these definitions in my book, but just through practice and keeping an open mind, um, you'll start to get a sense. Like I've looked at people and literally I usually don't talk since COVID. I don't talk about this that much publicly because everything gets censored, and then someone's going to misconstrue me as if I'm like diagnosing people, with medical conditions. So I always say, if you're having a medical emergency, call 911 and not a numerologist. And we could do I should do a numerology breakdown on 911 as well. But I mean, I've seen I've seen autoimmune conditions, like nailed things like, ulcerative colitis or lupus or something like that. And there's not in my book, any other numerology book, and you're certainly not going to find it online. Oh, this combination of numbers means this, right? Or this combination of numbers means that somebody should work in hospice care, right? But these are the things that pop out because the practice itself puts your mind in a different frequency, and that frequency attracts higher knowledge is the way that's the best way I could describe it. But there's something within all of us that we have access to something higher. So any divination is meant to trigger that response. And you brought up a good point too. Are these your birthday or whatever, is this fixed, is set in stone? This is just how you are. Not at all. I mean, for one thing, all of us use every single number in our life. But your chart, I mean, I really got into the charts because I learned my chart and I was like, God damn, that is spot on. And this is the stuff I need to work on. And so it's a great little instruction manual as to where I frame it usually as to where people have ability. There's deeper numerology that is sort of predictive, but it'll tell you what energies are at play and sort of, I guess, coded messages. And then how I interpret that is probably why I'm kind of known for it or good or writing books on it in a way.
You're very good at it. I got a reading from Remington in 2019.
Is it that long already?
It was either 2000. Yeah, it was late 2019. Jeez, it doesn't seem that long ago. A lot of life has happened.
Oh gosh, I was like, wait, I didn't even know about a kid or moving across the country, or
no,
I didn't even have a book out by then. Okay, yeah.
Yeah, and it was really remarkable. So I want to go into all of the juicy bits around astrology and numerology specifically. But the thing that I wanted to cover before we get into too much of that are so many modalities that can be used for good can also be used for evil, or at least to our detriment. What are some of the things that you need to contemplate before getting into numerology? Like, what are some of the pitfalls that you see people falling into as they start to get into these types of things?
The first I'm going to say is being too intellectual with it and being too heady and being too literal, right? You should go in and keep a really open mind. You take my book and get into this creative, artistic, poetic, meditative flow. So people and this is the same, if you're doing astrology, which I do, tarot, any other divination, I really used to be into I Ching, for example, and I go through phases. I can pretty much utilize any type of divination because once you learn the sort of big picture and how to interpret and allow it to be, an activator, which seems like a word I'll use a lot for this podcast, but it does trigger something in your psyche if you allow it. So you have to pay attention to that. I also tell people, and this merges with tarot, tarot is that'll be my next book, so we can talk even more on tarot. But I was taught you can never look it up in a book when you're doing a reading, because then it just becomes a philosophical, intellectual process, and you're completely removed from that flow of a higher wisdom that really is going to come through. So any divination, whatever it is, you need to allow that space, and there will be answers that come to you that you never knew you knew. Mm-hmm. And then eventually you take it into everything. You know, it's interesting you brought up you can like use it for some inherent evil. I'll tell you, numerology, I feel the numerology that I do for the charts, I think is pretty benign. I think, you know, the worst thing you could do is really sort of misinterpret it or think that you're fated, meaning like it's all fate, like you can't move out of something.
Right.
Right. Like you have, for example, my karma number. Wait, what month were you born?
December.
Okay, so your karma number, that would be a 3. And so that is what, you know, that's just something you're meant to work on. Now, I could interpret that and say, oh, you're always going to be, you know, 3 is, it could go in a lot of different directions. 3 is a number of strength. It is sort of, I call it the presidential number. It's a natural leader, right? So then you look at what's the deficient of that is going to be really meek, not going to sort of, I don't want to say stand up for yourself, not meaning you always have to set boundaries, but just assert yourself. Like 3 and 5 are powerful numbers, but the deficient of 3 is also overthinking and creating a sense of dread and like not processing things correctly. It's always going to be called the positive mind, right? Which should be optimistic, but then you take it, where are you working on? Well, where do you spin out on all worst case scenarios of everything, right? Mm-hmm. But like I could say, oh, well, that's how it always is for you. When really what you have access to is learning. What you're meant to learn this lifetime, among other things, is how to be a natural leader, how to stand in your confidence, how to, you know, there's a optimistic and organized and, you know, 3 is a more intellectual number and it really knows the right answer. It knows when to take action. It's great. I want to hire 3s if I was like starting a big company, something like that. So, you know, the more you step into some form of leadership and to feel confident in that. But what I do see, especially with astrologers, and this is just my experience. So anyone out there who really loves Vedic, and I'm sure there are amazing Vedic astrologers, but I do feel that
my landlord is a Vedic astrologer. So if you're watching, I don't agree with anything he's about to say.
Well, according to my Vedic interpretations, your rent could be lower. Now,
oh, thank you.
But I don't know, maybe it's just a cultural thing, but I do see it in astrology anyhow, where it's like you're speaking in terms of fate. And, you know, it is what it is. Like, for example, my sister-in-law went to an astrologer, and the astrologer said, well, your first marriage will end in divorce. I've had clients that have been told they will never meet a soulmate or a partner.
Jeez.
I've had women be told, you know, you'll never have a child, right? Things that they really longed for. And I know men that definitely long to have a child and a family for sure. But I think that's really dangerous because the way, and I feel like there's a lot of people out there, they're not trained in this at all. And I was trained a couple of things. 1, you have to be specific. 2, you have to provide the client with the solution. See, if you looked at a chart and said, no matter what, your first marriage will end in divorce, you know, she's been in a relationship for a long time. And I do feel like part of the hang up is that astrology reading. Because like, well, if I marry this guy, it's going to end in divorce. Now, I will say this astrologer did provide a solution that you should have a wedding ceremony, like marry a tree and then cut it down.
Okay.
That I would come up with a different solution, but at least that astrologer was providing a solution. So I always look at let's look at these conflicts and then what's the solution here? Like I'll do a read and maybe look into a new job for somebody. And maybe it's riddled with conflict and problems and deceit, you know. So when you become aware of that, it's not set in stone, maybe that it will be that way. And maybe that the outside will be that way, but what's not set in stone is how you can manage that. So, okay, be on your guard. I mean, I've seen crazy stuff in readings that have been really spot on, especially when you're dealing with other people and egos and things like that. But so it's just you have to give people a solution. I that's how I usually frame things. I like to see what is this person's, and most of my readings, like my main like sort of soul session, what is your highest potential that we can see at this point that's attainable? And all of these different whether it's astrology or numerology, can manifest in different ways, right? Like 3, which is a number of confidence. It's the 3rd chakra, which is your command center. It's the positive mind. You know, that could be too bossy, too assertive, too, you know, domineering, too controlling, things like that. You know, so maybe that's what you need to work on. But you know, so it just takes you just have to apply some wisdom. You also have to be specific. I mean, I'll get readings sometimes, like I'll be traveling and I'll go into a little spiritual tchotchke shop. And,
Love those.
you know, it's like $40. And I kind of just do it sometimes to support, and I'm a little curious, but it's always like really vague. Like, oh yeah, I see these great energies coming, and then big shifts for you. Like big shifts how? Like what's happening? Like is my book launch gonna go great? Or, you know, and that's where, and also the other thing is too, I try not to overspeak in the language of whatever divination it is, right? So I'm not going to be like, oh God, yeah, you have a soul of 5, right? Like I've had that, like, oh, your Pluto is transiting, you know, your 6th house. Like, oh. Okay, what the hell does that mean? So I was taught, when you do a reading, never assume that the querent has never heard of the word astrology, has no idea what Mars is, has no idea what tarot is, what the word Kabbalah, anything. So that also helps you to be more specific and to hone in what the heck you're actually trying to say. Like the tarot is always right. The astrology is always right. The numerology is always right. We maybe could interpret it better. And in hindsight, like it's so layered, and I have like interpreted things spot on, but then there was a whole other layer that went even deeper than I saw at that moment.
Right. Like at the beginning of 2020, what year was that in terms of numerology? That was like a
4.
Okay.
So 2020 was a 4 year.
And that was like COVID spectacular situation.
Yeah. So
what did 4 tell us about that? What did you predict for 2020?
Sorry.
No,
Great
go
question.
ahead.
So I'm like innocently rolling into 2020. It's a 4 year. 4 is a number of compassion. It's really high love, like love with a capital L, you know, like universal, like divine love, you know, accepting, merciful, beneficent energy of the universe. It's also, you know, the thing is with numerology, you're allowed to start just free associating. Right? So that's 4 in Kabbalah is Jupiter. And Jupiter is that expansion of miracles and love and wisdom. It's also the heart chakra, right? And a yogic system. So, and whatever other spiritual tradition you follow, there's numbers that are a part of it, you know. But I was saying that this is going to be a year, in a way, I said it's a year of rest. I was actually on a pretty big podcast at the beginning of the year, and they replayed the episode because I was super spot on, but it had nothing to do with the pandemic. I said it's a great year to spend time at home. I said it's a great year to like ease up and forgive yourself and forgive those around you. I did say, you know, 4's shadow side is going to be like prejudice. So things like racism. Well, what was the hot topic besides COVID? It was all race relations, and especially in America, right? We had all that George Floyd stuff. So I was like right on. I just didn't think, oh, that's how it was going to manifest. But I said this line on that podcast, and I said, this 4 year is like taking a bubble bath and relaxing and getting paid. Well, for the
Wow.
first time in like history, literally almost every person on the planet, it was like, I think over a third of the planet got like, had to stay at home. And in America, I know so many people that either like got on, extra unemployment, whatever the case was, and actually for the first time took like a year off in their life. Right.
Mm-hmm.
And as much as like people went broke and got weird, there was like the economy was actually booming. All these people were like day trading at home. So there was like a miracle aspect to it, because when's the last time that ever happened? Like, I don't think it's ever happened where you could just relax at home. And that's four could be a lazy energy. I think people are still reeling from it. I think a lot of people just want to be putzing around at home now.
Definitely. It brought up in a lot of us things that were repressed because of the busyness
Yeah.
that we had been born into. And I think, yeah, the reeling is not being able to unsee and unhear your inner narrative, which became very loud for a lot of people at that time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think we've seen a lot of despair. Like every death in my life has had nothing to do with COVID, but it has had to do with isolation, with
Mm.
addiction, with suicide, and other medical complications. And there's like it, and then for some people, I think realizing, oh, my life maybe on some level feels so small, and I'm just showing up to a job that I hate. Right? I think there's been a mass, like nobody can find help. It still seems that way. So I think like, but I also know a lot of people that use the miracle energy, and that's what I kept emphasizing. There's a miracle here. These are high things out of our control. A lot of this was out of our control, but I knew a lot of people that pivoted their businesses. There's so many stories, if you chose to look in that direction, of people that used that time to reassess their life, what they really want to do. They realized their job was meaningless and not paying them enough, and created businesses, looked at the opportunity. There's always opportunity. I think there's more opportunity now than there ever has been. But people also will fall into what I call the diabolical miracle. And that really emphasized, I think, a narrative in 2020 of just institutional oppression of some. Everything was institutional sexism, institutional racism, just institutional oppression. I mean, and the reality is, while you're getting oppressed, like you can't go here, you can't go there, you have to do this to get a slice of pizza, things like that. So I'm anti-oppression. But
Controversial.
what's that?
How controversial of you,
Yeah,
anti-oppression.
no,
How dare
that
you?
I know. Like you mentioned the word freedom now, and you're like, oh, Liz. But I hit the nail on the head, but I had no idea why. And I want to make it clear, I'm in this racket. I did not meet one astrologer, and I know some famous astrologers. Nobody called COVID. Nobody called it. What people said is there were some big crazy aspects happening, and 2020 could be a big shakeup year, but no one called it. And it's easy to call it in hindsight, but what I called was like, hey, we can spend more time at home, collect money. That's what like a lot of America did that.
Yeah.
A lot. And it's also crazy to think, I knew a lot of people that are just working, various odd end jobs, and all of a sudden with like unemployment and stuff, they're like, wait, I'm making like more a week than I am at my jobs. I also know a lot of people that totally got hurt, and it was a real problem. But I don't know. There's miraculous opportunities, that's for sure.
I'm glad this conversation is going this direction, because I have a very like real question that burns inside of me that I didn't realize you'd be the person I'd ask this to.
Okay.
About divination.
Yeah.
And fate consciousness versus destiny consciousness, because I love me some divination. I'm not a practitioner, but I'll pick up some cards here and there. I will reach out to people like you. I go see a psychic every once in a while, and I love astrology. I love all these things. and the I Ching. I have them tattooed on my arm
Nice.
here. But okay, there's a question that needs to be formulated in the right way here because it's a big one.
Okay.
And I feel like you might know where I'm going with this. But when you work with divination as somebody who actually is the practitioner, what are you working with to determine this potential outcome for the for the querent? Like, because you are saying that something is going to happen, but there's also free will, right? There's also many different timelines that we can tap into. So like, what is the thing that we're doing there?
Well, so I think tarot is a really great tool to get into divination. And what I always say is what tarot, for example, is going to show is it shows it's a mirror of what's happening now. Generally speaking, the trajectory of the future is based on the sort of current timeline of events. And so it'll show that trajectory. And so if you see a lot of problems and conflicts and all these swords and nine of swords and all these doom and gloom cards, you know, that's coming up because it's showing, look, this is the road that you're kind of going down. That's what this endeavor might be about. Maybe you're just like, hey, I'm going to vacation in Hawaii. And it's like, a lot of, and you may see, oh, okay, travel conflicts, delays, the hotel room might be moldy or something weird, or it's not as advertised, right? Like, so you have to take all that and say, okay, where can I be more prepared? For example, I did a read. I was traveling to New York City, and all I got was conflict cards, 5 of Wands with the strife. And I was like, okay, so what I need to do, I just knew it was all about timing of not missing the plane. And I needed to leave a lot earlier because I was like taking the train to the airport. I had left way early, and thank God, because the train had broken down. So then everything just getting to the airport was delayed by a couple of hours. They had to switch out the trains, and there was construction. So that's like minor, but I didn't say, oh, I'm going to have a horrible trip. It just let me see what was the external conflicts. What can I do about it? You know, some things are going to be out of our control too, but you know, the future, like if the future was set in stone, this is what my teacher taught me. If the future was set in stone, there would absolutely be no reason to do any of these divination practices because it is what it is. You have totally disempowered. You can't do anything. So why look into it? The whole point is to adapt and to cause change. So whenever I get like a negative card, if you will, that's a lesson that is, you know, it's on some level it's a warning, but the lesson is telling you, look, there's going to be problems in this arena, and this is the solution. So that's why I always have to speak in solution. It's not any different than you have a gas gauge on your car. That gas gauge, you know, you want your car to let you know, hey, you're on empty, you got to go get gas. And think about the amount of anxiety if you didn't have a gas gauge and you're like driving across country, like especially from like Arizona to Texas across the desert where you don't want to get like stuck. You know, so be thankful for those warnings. You're grateful for your gas gauge. And if you don't realize you are, take it, dismantle it, and see how anxious you are driving. But solution is the key, and that's just where a wise reader will, you know, look in those terms. What can I do about it? So, you know, I mean, sometimes it could be I'll get certain fiery cards, and I'll just know, okay, I'm not going to fly off the handle. I'm not going to react to anything. I'm not going to do anything ridiculous or impulsive. Like we just had this wild eclipse recently, and I got some like kind of heavy intense cards, and I was like one like sort of fiery destructive, and I was gonna like chainsaw some stuff around our property from these trees that have fallen and start a burn pile of debris, and I was like, you know what, that's not probably what I should do today. Right? Was I destined to have like some violent encounter? No, but we did. I led this meditation for this retreat, and they actually all came to our house. It was a group from New York City, and I had kept teaching that there was deeper numerology on this past eclipse, talking about the biggest thing you can do is the biggest sacrifice and the most noble sacrifice is a broken heart, and to
Hmm.
surrender your broken heart to the fires of love. And I was like, this is really beautiful. That's based on the number 14. And so that's deeper numerology. Well, after I was teaching about this, I even led a meditation to clear and heal a broken heart and to release grief. Um, and we had some people over, and it was like a long day. Everyone was tired. I was like, let's just get pizza. I'm not like cooking. And so I kept the pizzas warm in the oven, which I've done a million times. All of a sudden, my buddy looks over, everything's smoking. I open up the oven, the pizza box is on fire. And I was like, oh shit. My first instinct is like, okay, I grabbed mitts, let me just get it in the sink. But they were too much on fire. They all collapsed on our wood floor. And then we were like dousing it with water, and I had this big pot of tea on the stove. And I was like, okay, maybe I didn't surrender my broken heart, but I definitely sacrificed this pizza. But there, I did, like, the pizza's caught on fire, the box is caught on fire. I also learned, oh shit, this is how fires escalate fast,
Mm.
right? Like if our stove is in the wall, is in a stone wall. But I was like, oh, if this was our oven and then a dishcloth by it and by the other wood on our countertop, I was like, oh my god. And there's a little burn mark on our floor, but you know, I was talking about that incident and saying sometimes these things, through doing practices and meditations and working more on your destiny, even clearing out karma, not living, surrendering to like, it is what it is, this is the fate of my life, you alleviate a lot of situations that probably could have been a lot worse. Now, I don't
Mm.
know, but based on those cards, based on the energy of the eclipse, where it was for me, it's possible that had I not throughout my life done all that work, it could have been a more tragic and violent day. And so maybe the energy sort of got diffused through a pizza box. Does that make sense? Like,
Mm. So, okay, I really want to understand this.
okay.
The lesson, so do you assign meaning then to the fire that was started? Or is it sometimes pizza is just a pizza?
Both. I mean,
Okay.
sometimes a pizza is just a pizza, and I thought I had it on a low temperature. I've certainly done it like before. I think we've all put a pizza box in the
Sure.
oven. Uh, like I wasn't cooking; it wasn't on like 400. It was on the warm setting, so it was really low. So there is that, but I really feel intuitively in this case, based on everything that I saw that day, that it defused what there's a teaching, there's a yogic teaching that a lot of times, like maybe you stub your toe, you cut your finger, maybe you get into a fender bender, not none of this is great, but there actually was a sort of a timeline at one point where that accident could have been way worse.
Okay.
And so by being in this energy flow and staying up with some level of practices, and this isn't like about reward or punishment, but you're
Mm.
changing your frequency. I know someone who they're like hardcore military person, and now they're a pretty hardcore yogi. But there actually are a bunch of military guys that I know in yoga. Um, but he kept having premonitions of a really bad car accident, like a huge pile up that he was in the middle. Like he was having dreams about it. And there's a protection mantra in yoga. Advidedame, Jugakadedame, Sakadedame, Siddhividedame. Anyhow, that just gets said often. And the idea of that is that it changes the time, your ability to respond. It gives you 9 seconds. So all of a sudden, some time later, he actually drove up onto the accident that he kept envisioning,
Mm.
that he was having dreams, like he was like in the tragic part in this accident, his cars flipped over. He drove up on the accident. He was like, oh my God, this is the accident. But although there was a lot of car damage, to the best that he could tell, it didn't look like any real serious injuries. I mean, he didn't know for sure, but he also, nothing affected him. He came up after the fact. And my friend is very intuitive, very psychic. So that's what I'm saying. Like there's so many levels to this work. But if I get the death card in a reading, that's usually not, it's not, you're not dying.
Right.
Have I seen death in a reading? Absolutely. Like I literally see it around someone. I'll just ask, like, do you have a sick relative, family member? And then it'll turn out, oh, I've been caretaking for my father, his stage 4 cancer or whatever. And in that case, I'm going to say, look, all of this points to that transition. So you should do what you need to do, and whatever you need to say, and be prepared and to know this is, I mean, we all know it's inevitable, but it's popping up in a reading. It's probably happening sooner than later.
This is a topic that I'm absolutely obsessed about. This realm of life's inherent challenges, the trauma of life, the adversity of life, and what is its purpose in our experience. Back when you and I talked in 2019, I was telling you about doing this documentary on post-traumatic growth, and you're like,
Right.
yeah, do that.
Well,
so now actually,
you have a good chart for all that stuff.
Thank you.
You have a good chart for trauma.
I know, right? So because I know that, I'm being very proactive about it. I'm like, I'm chasing the trauma, it's not chasing me.
Right.
But in that exploration, we were looking at, well, okay, so why do bad things happen to good people, more or less? That thing we've been screaming at the heavens for as long as we probably could. And so the big kind of debate actually in between our team is this one idea around who are we to determine what is a bad event, because we all know that sometimes some tragic death in our family that seems unbearable at the time and probably is quite unbearable for a long time afterwards created a cascade effect of somebody then realizing what's important in life. And then there's another side on our team that's like, but we have free choice. Like, did Jesus Christ have to be crucified on the cross for all of us to find salvation? Like, is there a way around these things? So if I can, tell me if I'm on the right track here with what you're saying and what I'm saying and trying to resolve some of this. Is it that, okay, there's an energy or a lesson that the universe is inviting us to learn from? And if at some point it just may stop playing nice, but if you tune into that lesson, the lesson that it expresses itself in may be more subtle and less like getting nailed to the cross and more like your pizza box is on fire.
Which is better than getting crucified.
I think so.
I even saved 2 of the pieces. But, well, I'm going to say, I think we all definitely think about this type of thing. The way that not just I, these are sort of the way maybe it was taught to me is, some things probably are inevitable. But we, like, by doing certain spiritual just practices, living a life dedicated to some type of evolution, that's the evolution of your soul. There's endless practices, endless spiritual traditions. You're definitely creating, you're giving yourself a lot more ability and a lot more empowerment. And so that's what I was trying to say is like that time that, someone maybe cuts their finger, slicing celery or something, where maybe their frequency was at one point was off kilter enough, right? I see a lot of karma as just sort of this mismatch of like off kilter frequencies. We're always trying to reconcile and sort of clear up. And, so perhaps that just cutting your finger and bleeding, putting a Band-Aid on, I really think, oh, that could have been a worse situation. I mean, I can speak for myself. Years ago, when I lived a lot more chaotically, through my own struggles of addiction and depression and whatnot, that's all I created around me. All I created was problems, right? I was always like broke. I was always like in some sort of chaos, just for like basic life management. And as I move out of that energy, which is what inspired my new book, Prosperity Practices. As I move out of that frequency, that's where we have free will. We can move out of those frequencies. I do believe that everything is connected, and we're creating things, right? I mean, how many stories, you probably heard this, where someone's like, they're complaining about something. I actually knew someone that kept complaining about, their children and this and that. Then they got like ovarian cancer because they kept like, we create so much. And I think we create a lot of problems through just shitty thinking, not smart lifestyle. I know for me, when I was in the throes of like active addiction, which is already expensive, and then I was still into all of this stuff, right? So it was a real struggle, and I was living a double life, and I couldn't just surrender and say, look, I have a problem, and I'm totally dedicated to my spiritual evolution, but I was just creating chaos. I was always like living in some scarcity. And those were the things I started to change around, all through, from the simplest things to like a gratitude list, for example. But I was at a point in my life where the only solution that made sense to me was to die. That was my only way out. Like I had convinced myself that I was sort of incarnated just slightly in the wrong time and place, right? Like I want to be like a free, vibey spirit. And it's not like I worked and things like that, but just the most basic things in life felt like the biggest struggle. We're just like keeping a job and renting a room and just paying minimal of bills and things like that. But also what I didn't confront is I really had a lot of depression that I sort of brushed off, and also addiction. And so everything was nothing. I was always a day late and a dollar short. Except for one day for me, was the first day I was clean, which was November 1st of 2012. And I had nothing. I was totally broke, but I was like, I need to change the frequency. I need to change it. So I got really on my meditations, but I remember I had nothing, and I was about to get evicted. And I made the longest gratitude list of my life. I mean, I was grateful for my toothbrush. I realized, okay, how much I had, and it took away so much of my despair and my anxiety. And I'm telling you, from that moment on, everything kept working out. And a lot of times too, like you'll have a heavy hitter, you'll see the Tower card and the Death card in astrology. That's going to be some sort of Pluto, Mars, like, oh shit. And you know what? Those sort of blessings in disguise are completely blessings that are not in disguise. We're just attached to our own ego narrative of how we think everything is supposed to work out, right? So it's learning there's a balance that is tricky, and I don't have the perfect answer, but there's a balance of allowing divine purpose and flow, and like receiving and taking action. What I've gotten good at is allowing the receptive space and know where to take action. Mm-hmm. And I've gotten way better at action. But when I was in all of that depression and addiction, nothing worked out. Like I got fired, I got evicted. It's not like people liked me, they were like apologizing, but like, I couldn't line anything up. I just couldn't make ends meet. And that's why I was like, oh, I'm such a miserable failure at life. Like I just can't function. I literally went to the beach in Venice and wrote a suicide note, and my pen literally ran out of ink. And
Wow.
I'm not exaggerating. It was a brand new pen that I took out of because I was doing stand-up comedy. So I hand wrote all of this material all the time, and I kept a notebook with me all the time. And I literally took a brand new pen. It ran out of ink. Like, and I kept like scratching it, like, like, okay. And I know now, like, that was divine interference, being like, dude, shut the fuck up. But at that moment, I felt so defeated. I felt like such a life loser that I'm like, wow, I'm so pathetic that I can't even write a suicide note. Where is that? Was I gonna totally act on it? I don't know, but that's where I felt. Like, I felt so much peace once I decided that's what I needed to do. Um, and admittedly, I probably didn't have the guts, but still, I was in that space. I just wish, like, I got hit by a truck. And that's the thing. I think I could have set that up. I think a lot of overdoses are inadvertent. They're suicides, whether it's just an unconscious one. How many stories of people where they're like, they've been married for 80 years, their whole life, you married your like third grade sweetheart, and that person, they die, and they get into a car accident like a couple days later. Like, I've seen that a lot, but I mean, I was creating a shitty frequency, but I do feel like the sort of, whether you want to say God's will for you or your higher purpose, your higher destiny, is meant to be prosperous. And as you do these practices, shit just starts to work out. You're always in the right place in the right time. And since that gratitude list, that has 100% been my life.
Why are so many, for lack of a better word, spiritual people so broke? Like, that's a thing.
Like, financially?
Yeah.
Because they need to read my new book,
I want to talk
Prosperity
about that.
Practices. That is I thank you for bringing this up. I think we're still operating in an old paradigm that is designed to keep people oppressed and broke. And I think that there's still a narrative that spirituality shouldn't involve money. Now, money, like when we look at tarot, look at astrology, look at magic, look at alchemy, we have 4 worlds. We have the 4 elements. We have fire, we have water, so there's fire signs, there's water signs, there's air signs, there's earth signs. The tarot is broken down that way. Well, earth is money. And so I think that our culture just comes from these like transcendent monastic vow traditions. I mean, whether it's Buddhism, whether it's Christianity, where you sort of give everything up, right? I fell into that narrative because I grew up on an ashram where people literally were so hardcore yogis, they took monastic vows. They lived like monks and nuns dedicated to their practice. You take a monastic vow as taking a vow of poverty and celibacy. And so I just think that's still running the course. But also, as I started to learn magic when I was a little older, like, that money is really important. It took me a while to sort it out and to have more drive. But making money is a form of self-care, is a form of self-love. And you have to know that the earth realm is just as spiritual as the quote spiritual realms or the emotional realms or the intellectual realms. But I think that I think I see a lot with a lot of clients. There's still a lot of programming around spirituality, or you can't charge and things like that. And those were definitely my lessons. I actually pitched this book from saying, like, I went from $11 an hour to hundreds of thousands of dollars, right? Like, that's a powerful trajectory. I think there's a lot of misfunction with what people perceive as spirituality and with money. In magic, the teaching is spirituality is the whole of your life. So if you start thinking being like successful financially and creating that as part of your spiritual practice, you're incarnated on earth. like we, you have to create resources. Like even if we're just living, in the sticks somewhere, you still have to like gather, you still have to hunt, you still have to provide. Um, but yeah, I don't. What are your thoughts on the money deficiency? Because it's a common thing for sure.
Well, I mean, just on the surface, I think I'm going to group myself into the type of person that has grown up seeing the haves as people who are oppressive, creating difficulty to rise up through the financial ranks. Um, Perhaps observing, so I'm from South LA and I don't come from an impoverished family, but I had a lot of that around me. And so I was very aware of the haves and the have nots and how the have nots seem to serve the haves and this lack of gratitude from both parties. And then being somebody who also likes to look out for the little guy, then feeling like I'm on their team. And if I'm going to be on their team, then there must be some kind of divide that then puts me onto the other team, which I have deemed evil. So
Right.
I've done a ton of work around this, and I wouldn't even call it work, but just in observation and having more life experiences around people that, create resources out of unresolved trauma and hoard money, and then the other kind of person that is creating from a place of abundance and gives back, and there's a constant flow of this kind of energy that they're putting out into the world. And now being more aware of that, I'm like, oh, okay, I think I really understand a prosperity practice and what that could mean. Because before, when I would do a prosperity practice, it would be rooted in some kind of separateness from spirit.
Interesting. Yeah, and I guess I mean that's what we're both saying. I think you have such a deep point though of either looking at people that have those resources, demonizing it. But to be honest, this is probably a controversial statement, but it's a reality. Poverty is fucking selfish. Like
Ooh, tell me more about that.
you're not. I was poor for too long. I couldn't give anything. I mean, I just like these little things. Like all I'm doing is my life. When your life is focused on just your day to day financial struggle, even if you're like, hey, I do my meditations and stuff like that, I am not providing. Not only it's selfish to myself, but I have no means in which to help and provide and expand for others.
Mhm.
And I realize now, looking back, like God, it's really easy to be self-absorbed and being poor, and your entire life is about the managing of a few dollars. I would I'd have to check my bank account if I was going to spend $12 on lunch at one point. And I certainly didn't buy lunch for anybody else. And so I was just living in scarcity. I think it's really cool that we're bringing this up because astrologically today, at the time of recording this, at 1:26 p.m. in my Eastern time, but right now, at the time of recording this, Jupiter just entered Taurus. And Taurus's shadow side is all about scarcity, poverty, depravity. Its positive side is material security, your true talents and self-worth and self-value. People are poor inherently on some level because they don't value themselves. There's also conditioning that money is the root of all evil, especially with spiritual people. Money's all evil, right? Capitalism is evil, blah, blah, blah. And what I always say is the lack of money is the root of all evil. Because even people that are like, there's all these billionaires, there's like 6 billionaires that are super famous and they're just like on a world domination insanity. Well, it's insatiable. It's because they still feel like they lack,
Oh.
in my opinion. So, also I've flipped things that when I didn't have, say, a lot of money, I had a really rich life, right? So it's an attitude adjustment. I know people that are rich as fuck and that are really poor. Their psyches are poor, their energies are poor, and they have no idea what they're doing. And except they're able to tune into money for whatever reason. I think money is a huge trigger, but this Jupiter and Taurus, Jupiter is love, is kindness and abundance, relates to the number 4, and Taurus is your resources. Taurus is where you find out what is your talent and how can you apply your talents to create resources, financial security, solvency. It's the money sign. And like I can share this because this was some of my journey, but Jupiter is going to be this high roller and it's very giving. So that's where it's important too to like to give. And I just got better at that. And then things just kept growing for me financially, switching all those things, you know. And also learning more about like there's a frequency I'm putting out there. What is that frequency worth? You know, I was making $11 an hour as an adult man, which was also super triggering because I'm like, I should be accomplished way more as a man. I'm like 40. And then that I would just spiral out like I'm a total loser. Right? Those are the deficient sides that are Taurus. Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is about true self-worth. Otherwise, it's about jealousy. And it's what you said. You're comparing yourself to others. You're comparing yourself to the haves. And therefore, you're deficient. You couldn't be that. And I mean, of course, I mean, I want the planet to do well, but I think most of the planet on some level is operating in profound scarcity. And I see this Taurus energy moving around. And these signs right now, at the time of recording this, the big energies, big abundant energies moving in that. Some people could go big in scarcity. Jupiter is going to add more to whatever you're doing. So it could make you more poor if you want to live in that. So you got to learn to just not love money out of greed, love money out of self-love and self-care. That was my biggest lesson. Making money is self-care.
Yeah, I love that. So your book isn't available here in the U.S. or in
Well,
Canada
probably
yet.
when is this coming out? It's available on the 23rd. So we're coming up like less than a week or so or whatever.
I'm gonna see if I can put this out today, actually, which is the
Oh, great. Well,
16th.
you can pre-order it. It's like
Great.
it's pop. People are already posting. They have it, and people are getting it in Canada.
Okay.
So that tells me it's sitting. It's like ready to go. But the official release day is May 23rd. And this book it's not about me, but these are all practices that I have utilized and people I know have utilized from different spiritual traditions, from magic to yoga, to working with, you know, what I call transformational arts people. You know, I've had some great life coaches, a lot of lessons learned on the way. And like here's one: 50 things you can do to earn money now. So if you're I actually got people doing that at the height of COVID because everyone's in a panic. Like, we didn't know we're going to lose everything. We're going to be out in the streets, and that has happened. But the original practice is 100. But if you're feeling like scarce about money and you feel like you have no options, just make a list. Write down 50 things, even if you won't do them, even if you're not going to like start a cleaning service or go collect recycling cans and redeem them for the 5 or 10 cents. But you will realize that you have a lot more talent and you have a lot more options out there. I mean, anxiety, like lack of money produces a lot of anxiety. So that's like one little practice in here that will change your mindset. And you're like, wait, I have talent. So we're in this theme of recording this, of themes of where do you have talents, you know, and start applying those. But I definitely, money has been a long journey for me.
Mm-hmm. Well, I listened to a podcast that you did a while back where you talked about some of those moments being a male, white 40-year-old and being like, I'm supposed to be a certain thing. And that really rang true for me, even though I'm none of those things. But because I see that in men that I am friends with, I see that in men walking down the street, and I see how that, like, you know, the body dysmorphia and all the things that come along with male mental health that's still today seen as a non-issue, especially for white men. You know, it's like, you're fine. Well, poor, you know, little white boy. You know, all you need to do is try. But the reality is frequency. I mean, if that shit's not right, like it doesn't matter what color you are or where you're from, it's just gonna look like crap.
Yeah, that frequency is really disempowering. I don't think there's enough compassion or awareness as to what men go through. And it's not like men are even generally speaking aren't going to talk about it. Like, I'm not starting men's groups to be like,
Yeah.
let's like, where did you feel like a loser? I wish there was, I mean, now, like, I feel like my greatest success is literally like, is Gina is for the most part a stay-at-home mom now. That's sort of our joke. We work from home, yeah, but she's doing a lot less at the back end, and we have help now, and that feels really good to me. And I don't feel like our society is grooming men at all to want to feel empowered to create legacy of family. In magic, one of the teachings that if you're a teacher, you have to leave a legacy. So like writing a book, or now in my case, 2 books, like I'm like, okay, I'm fulfilling that, but having a family, I feel like men are mostly groomed to go either try to be, magnanimously successful and a dashing playboy and gallivant around and always be, whether if you make a ton of money, you're going to be stunted on some level, or if you're broke. I know what guys feel, and I used to do comedy, and I had a joke. I was like, women complain that like it takes them 2 hours to like get ready to go out on a date. I was like, it takes men like years to get ready to go out on a date because you want to have enough money, you want to impress, you want to have like a good car, and that's the vanity of our society. But I don't know. I think that is something that could be compassionately addressed more, and I just think it really transcends like cultural limitations and things like that. And yeah, I mean, I could like, sure. I mean, I know I'm like a white guy. I don't like, and I don't identify like my identity isn't like I'm a man. It's the work I do is very like female driven. Like more women are drawn to these types of means of self discovery and self improvement. In my experience, are there men around? Yes, but for the most part, yeah, I don't know. I really let that get me down. I mean, talk about feeling like I had a bicycle. You know what I mean? Like I would meet like a girl in LA, and they're like occasionally it'd be like a famous supermodel. Like you were like looking them up, you're like, oh, okay. And then I didn't want to meet them. Like I'm gonna like go bike to like a place I couldn't afford. So I see where you can just be that guy who's just gonna give up and like live in a basement.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I love about the work that you do, the way that you speak, maybe who you are as a person, is you're so real. Like, I love that you can talk about this stuff because you've had so much life experience. And then growing up in that ashram, like you were born into this life. So you're not some person that moved to LA and like found it at 39 and now you're this master. Like, I think that growing up through it, you've bypassed a lot of the cliches and the
Right.
things that make this unapproachable and feel weird to a lot of people. And I really respect that. I love that so much.
I love hearing that. I feel like I do embody it. I've been lucky to have very powerful teachers. What I will say, though, what I found delightful about Los Angeles as I started to get into this work more, which was really like my destiny, was in LA, like growing up on an ashram, numerology, these are all marketable skill sets. There's a magic in LA, and I finally didn't have to hide it. Like when I was a little kid, but well, not that, like when I was like 10, 11, I started going to public school because the ashram had moved to a different state, and I was in my little community. We went to our own private school. We'd go to school every day. We'd chant. We'd have like do a little puja ceremony. We'd do yoga. All the kids would meditate. We had a circle. We'd all go around, I guess like show and tell or something, but we'd talk about what's going on with us and our feelings. And then I'm in like regular public school, which felt like I was in like I don't know who these kids were, like a bunch of like, barbarians that ate sugar and red meat and were all mean, right? Like that, I was like used to a very caring, sensitive environment. Um, but I was like really ashamed. I wanted parents that were super straight. Even my parents did like craft shows for a living. And
Oh.
I wanted like, I started dressing really, like really nice. Like I had like always had nice shoes and button up shirt. I tried to look really straight. And I just wanted like, oh, if only my parents worked at like a corporation or did something like that. You just want to fit in. So I was like for a while embarrassed. Then you get older, you don't care. But LA, like the culture really values these alternative ideas and alternative mindsets, and I think now it's more aware, more mainstream. But it definitely helped me to learn to like monetize my skill sets. I mean, I used to do readings, like maybe a little donation, and I just didn't think. I always thought, oh, for someone to do what I do, that's just what someone else does that. You don't really make it as a teacher, right? LA is full of people that want to make it. They want to be the next prophet of humanity, guru, yoga teacher, or something. But if you have the goods, I mean, my stuff all developed word of mouth. And then my clients, it just got to a point, it just like, I barely even do readings. It's more like teaching and sharing and writing and things like that. So yeah, I mean, it's just, I think it's about embodying it. And being like, I do it because this is what I love the most. And I still never thought it was a means to like make a living at all.
Yeah.
And I think the lesson for a lot of people is if it's the thing you would do for free, a lot of times those seem like those are the things that you become the most successful at and probably do really well.
Mm-hmm. So to wrap this up, what makes your prosperity book different than other how to make money books out there?
To get rich quick. Well, so it's prosperity practices. So in the sort of say new agey law of attraction world, I think a lot of that short circuits, right? So I see it's all visualization. You're all in the cosmos, right? And this is like tangible. I'm going to do this right here and now. And so that's why it's a practice, right? So it's not just like positive thinking. These are just little things that you do. But I think that, like these are things that I've done. I've had a powerful transformation, but these are also practices that I've seen other people have even more powerful transformations. And I think I throw enough in here. Like some of these, if you do these, will be an aha shift and an aha moment. And some might be positive, may not have that depth. But one of the practices, and I share the story in this book about not complaining. I know a woman who set out, she was with a little group of people, and their goal was to become multimillionaires. Sure, did they do the other work? Did they have some sort of opportunity, right? And I feel like some of this new agey stuff out there is like you sit around, you manifest, and a check's going to show up for you for like $2 million.
You just disassociate for a little bit and something magical is supposed to happen.
Well said. Yeah, you totally disassociate, and you're up in the ethers. Money's all energy anyhow. And then nothing happens. And like, I always want to do comedy around this. Like you're going to pay your like landlord or whatever, your mortgage. You're like, oh man, it's all just energy and I'm sending you good vibes. This is hands-on. But this woman did that practice. She is a multimillionaire between property, assets, other things. Did she have a means, a business she was creating? Yes. But she felt that was the one practice, as well as doing all of the other stuff, but that was the little thing that pushed it all over the edge. And so I drop a lot of these in here. What changed my life the most was that first gratitude list. I started tracking my numbers and I started doing some prosperity meditations, as well as I hustled my ass off, right? Like there's a book chapter in here, like just always be earning. If money's your focus, always be earning. Don't come in like, oh, I'm too good for that. I'm too good to do Uber Eats, or these like odds and ends jobs. I did all that crap as I was building this business up. So it's really hands on. This isn't like the stuff of fantasy. This isn't just blind visualization and endless hope, because I've seen that. I've literally done readings for people where I'd see in their chart, my God, this person absolutely could build out like a huge like center. They had great stuff for properties, retreat spaces, all that type of stuff. They're like, they were crying. This is exactly what I'm going to do. I know it's going to happen. And then I find out they have like literally $18 in the bank. I'm like, well, that's a big disconnect. I don't know what all the energy is here, but then you have to do the legwork. Like, so I teach in this, the magical teaching is making yourself a fit receptacle. So this book is rooted in reality and doing the work, and not just the fantasy of just a positive thought. Positive thinking is one part of it. I mean, you've probably seen it. Like, people visualize, especially in LA, people are like, oh, I want to be, a big producer. I'm like, well, what are you doing about it? Mm-hmm. You might have a powerful vision of it, but you also need to start pulling. You need to do it. Right. This is a book of action.
Beautiful. Everyone needs a microdose on little bits of action. I had
we need to microdose action. I love that. Yeah.
Like, I was in LA a couple weeks ago, and I went to a restaurant and sat at the bar area and met this really lovely young man who is a director and moved to LA to be a director, and he's working in a restaurant like a lot of them do. And he was telling me the idea for his next thing. And I was like, great, what are you doing about that? And he's like, well, I haven't really gotten started on it. And then I asked him the question, but like, why? He's like, well, do you want me to really tell you why? And what he was alluding to is like, I'm scared as fuck. Like, what happens if I actually try? And so how about we end on this?
I know, what is the thing? Going on this.
No, I don't want you to go. What is the thing that keeps people from being prosperous?
Oh, that is deep. I think ultimately it's some level. I mean, sure, there's all the program, but it's some level of fear of success or fear of failure. And I think that comes down to comfort zone. Comfort zone is where your dreams go to die. So just try it out. People like create these shows in their head about everything that nobody's watching. Nobody cares. And as you just got to do the work, and just try it out. Like that one, that's even ties to the numerology of 11. Like, you may not know for sure, but at least try something. It gets momentum going. It gets the ball rolling. And that the universe responds to that. And I think the universe responds to putting in the effort and the work, because a real pro to me is doing the work. The amateur is just living in the realm of ideas. Everybody in LA and everywhere else has a great idea for something, but it's useless if you don't put it into reality. I'd suggest taking the action, put something into reality and say, all right, that wasn't as good as I thought, or it wasn't whatever, because then there's momentum. The universe responds to that and making it real.
Beautiful. Remington, oh my gosh, I can't believe you're on my show. You're my favorite numerologist ever.
How many numerologists do you know? I feel like it's like when
I've stopped looking.
when my book hit #1 in like new numerology. Well, Jessica, you're amazing. I'm super grateful. I know we've been wanting to do this for a few months now, but I was like, I hit #1 in new release numerology. I'm like, because I'm probably the only book. And I actually went on to Amazon, and there was 28 books in that category. Hey. I was like, who the hell are these people writing about numerology? Because my joke is like, I'm the guy, I wrote the book on it.
Yeah.
But my next book is Prosperity Practices, Harnessing the Power of Positive Thinking to Get the Life You Want. These are gems. These are the things that absolutely changed my life. And I literally went from severe suicidal depression, flat broke on food stamps, to like, I support a family I mean, I do what I love for a living. I call the shots. I create my schedule, and I thought I'd always be alone, you know. And I have a really amazing wife who's also really attractive,
She is. She's
and
hot.
and my son is adorable. And so these were the things I never thought. I gave up at some point, you know. And it's I share with the world literally the practices that I did. And so you may already be operating at a bigger level. You can still use these, whatever you want to level up in your life. That's what this book is for, and wherever you're at and whatever prosperity means for you. So I'm super excited about this, because at the end of the day, I think real spirituality is about causing that change and creating and having a better life on all levels. And it's all your spirituality.
Beautiful.
So you are amazing. I really respect the deep work you do. I would love to do this again, and we could go even deeper and darker.
Yeah, we didn't get to touch on the aliens and the stuff we were like playing around
Next
with.
time,
So,
alien prosperity.
alien prosperity. Oh my God, I'm so here for it. So what I'm going to do is track my dreams and all the questions that need answering. And then
Oh my God.
I'll ask you.
No, for real, do that. I don't advertise dream interpretation, but it's like through Kabbalah, it's divination. I love interpreting dreams.
Oh, I love that. I've had some really weird ones lately, so there's a lot.
Okay. We could probably sit here for the rest of the day into tomorrow with so much to talk about, but you are such a gem and such a like bright and helpful energy. And I know the deeper work you do, and it's powerful and transformative, and such a sincerity and a grace and like just a nicety. There's a levity. Make it easy. Like I will tell, I am podcasting about, wanting to die. So that, if you just help me feel loved and safe and open, so I think you're doing really profound work.
Thank you for saying that. And thank you for coming on. And for everybody watching and listening, pick up Remington's books. The numerology one I have here, if you're watching the YouTube version, they're so cute and so beautiful.
Oh yeah. They're super gifty both.
They're adorable. Like I love having them just out because they're a vibe, and I love a hardcover too.
I'm grateful.
It feels very like theatrical and like ceremonial to open up a hard book,
It does. They did it. I know we're trying to end, but my team is really, really sweet. They're mostly English. One of the designers is Australian, but the designer emailed me when she first got the contract for this book, and she said, she was like, tarot and yoga and symbolism are my favorite things. This book's a dream project. And my editor is just her. She has such a kind energy, but her mother is really into all this stuff in England. And she actually sent me a pendulum that she made out of these ancient stones by the sea, by where she lives in England. So there's just, my team really has like a caring and sincere energy. And I think it just comes through in the visuals, and the writing, and just the general energy around it. So I feel really blessed to have like a really supportive crew. And we just were like, let's make the best books on these.
Oh, well, I hope you write like 10 more books, because I like all of them.
I'm working on it. I'm about to pitch another book. I have many in the works, at least 3 more for sure.
Awesome. Well, you're going to come back on soon.
Yeah, I'd love to. We're settled, so let me know. I'll hop on. We'll go deep, dark, dream, weird.
Yay. There we go. All right, Remington. Love you. Thank you so much.
Love you too. Thanks, Jess. Bye.